What's going on, fanatics? Today we are going to be talking about what many people consider Stephen King's magnum opus. Yes, we are talking about The Dark Tower. And I am very lucky to be joined by longtime friends, Julian and Robin. So I hope you enjoy. So thank you both for coming on today. And as you could see, I dressed in all black today, uh, just to kind of represent something from the book, The Man in Black, right? Um, so, if you don't mind, could you guys introduce yourselves and kind of explain how you guys know each other?
Sure.
Go ahead.
So my name's Julian. I've been I've been a Dark Tower fan since about 2007. The series has left like the most profound impact on me, like out of any type of media, and I say it's really an obsession, or it's been an obsession. Yeah, just really love to talk about it, get into it. I know Robin, and I've known him since I don't know what the equivalent in the US is, but we have like before kindergarten we have one grade, and that's how long I've known him. So he's like outside of my family, he's the person I've known for the longest time.
Yeah, as he mentioned, my name's Robin. Yeah, we met pre kindergarten. It's been what, 20, 25, 24 years. So it's been a while. I got into the books through him. I think he originally heard about them from his big brother or his dad, I think it was. And he sort of introduced them to me, which is great because he read a little further along. There's always this great conversational piece between us.
Wonderful.
It was a huge part for both of us, I think. For me too, growing up, I mean, as I mentioned before, I named my email address after the series, so I read them all. I loved them, read them multiple times. And it was pretty much all we talked about for a good 5 years, I'd say.
That is awesome. And can you guys kind of so for anybody who hasn't read the series or watched the movie, although the movie really doesn't have much to do with the series, this is gonna, like, I want you guys to not be afraid of spoilers. Just, full on, just talk about anything that you guys want to talk about. But for anybody who hasn't watched it or is watching this because they're interested in the series, can you guys kind of give a brief description, or if somebody had to tell you why should I read The Dark Tower, what would you guys tell them?
It's hard to sum it up in a concise way, but I think the setting to me is very interesting. It's got this sort of Fallout-ish, the first book is basically a Western. It sounds like a Western, just with bits of modern technology and fantasy aspects sprinkled in. So if that sort of setting is of interest to you, I think the books are great. I personally really like the world building, really enjoyed the interconnectivity and the depth to the story. That's what kind of draw me to it, or rather made me still want to read them now, as opposed to other fantasy books that I would have read as a young adult and then kind of, forgot about.
Yeah, and would add great characters. If you just like really fleshed out characters, and if you'd like to read something that is quite out of the ordinary, like it's not your standard, even though like Lord of the Rings is obviously a fantastic series, but it's very straightforward. It's very like rooted in a certain type of fantasy, and I think it's very hard to like attribute any like known like genre cliches or stereotypes towards the Dark Tower.
Gotcha. Yeah, and it's very much an original piece, definitely. But from everything that I've read on it, it is heavily inspired by Lord of the Rings. So I think it's funny that you kind of mentioned that. And do you see the similarities in that, like as far as like a great adventure?
I think it's not just a great adventure. You also have this theme of this singular purpose that the characters and the world strives to. I mean, the tower and the Dark Tower being the ring there, and it's pretty much. I mean, the whole thing is a huge journey and the travel. I mean, the entire book they're going towards the Dark Tower, or in the other, and towards Isengard to burn the ring, or Mordor.
More,
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm showing my lack of in-depth knowledge on Lord of the Rings. But I
I
think both are sort of an adventure story.
got you. And it's also like focused on a group of people, right? Um, so
Quartet.
yeah, the Quartet, which I think is an interesting name. I don't know where it comes from. So, disclaimer here: I've only read the Gunslinger, so I haven't gotten around to reading the rest of the books. But I've read enough about it to know where, like, the core of the story. I know how it ends, which I think is really funny. It's like a really controversial, polarizing part of the book, right? It's either
Yep.
you think it's amazing or you think it's like the most horrible thing. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Daniel Green.
There.
No.
Don't no, don't think so.
So Daniel Green is like an up and coming like YouTuber, right? And
Okay.
he's like he focuses on reviewing and talking about fantasy books, right? And I think it's really funny because he's like I don't recommend reading The Dark Tower necessarily. He's like even though I think it's great, he's like but it's not for everybody. You know, not
Yeah.
maybe not everybody's gonna like it, and one of the main reasons is because of the ending. The ending is very polarizing, which I think is very typical for Stephen King.
And
like
yeah.
like a lot of his fans say that he doesn't know how to end a book really. Like he dives really deep into character development and character relations and then kind of like, "Oh, I got to finish the book now. So let me come up with an ending." But another question for you guys is how did you guys get introduced to Stephen King? Was the first thing that you read like The Gunslinger, or was it a movie, or when do you remember watching something from him or reading something from him?
Like for me, it was through my dad. Um, he talked about Firestarter, which I haven't read up until now. But I just at 14, I got Pet Cemetery, which was then my first, which I loved, and second one was actually The Gunslinger. So I just dove in and like it was love at first sight. And then I introduced it to him. I think.
Yeah, you
Right.
did. I think the Gunslinger might have actually been my first, at least the first one that I specifically read, knowing it was King. I might have seen, I don't know, maybe I've seen Sean Sharks before, but that was the first time I intentionally read. And speaking of the ending, one of the first things that Julian told me was that the first sentence in the first book was also the last sentence in the last book.
No,
That's one of the very first
I
things
wouldn't
he
do
told
that.
me. Yeah, it's like it's not an important spoiler, but and to me that is still one of the greatest sentences like to start the book out with. The man in black fled across the desert and the gunslinger followed. It's such a great way to just kick it off and get you interested.
Yeah, and I think I'm happy that you mentioned that line because you're right. It is probably one of the greatest starting lines that I have ever read, right? And actually, what's funny for me, the first time I ever heard about the Dark Tower was when I was a little kid, and it's more of a memory than me hearing about it. I was walking through like the store, right, like the bookstore, and I would always see Stephen King novels, obviously, because they always display his books. But the one that I remember the most, and it's like a vivid memory, and it probably gave me like some amount of trauma because I don't really like trains that much. But it's the cover of The Wasteland with like the evil train face. And I don't know what about that cover just like stuck out to me so much. And I never forgot that cover. And I was kind of always interested. And then when I saw the cover, like years later, as an adult, when I saw the cover of The Dark Tower, the last book, with the gunslinger holding the rose and like the tower in the background, I'm like, first of all, that's like a badass title for a book. like the Dark Tower. That's so intriguing. And then that's kind of what got me interested in it. But so earlier, Julian, you said that this book made a big impact in your life. Can you kind of dive into why that is?
I guess just due to the genius of it all. I think just personally, the experience that I had reading it was like the most moving journey that I ever went on with a book or any type of entertainment. And I like just before doing this podcast, I remembered the part where Eddie dies. I don't know if you know that, but he's one of the main characters, and he dies in the seventh book. And I just remember like feeling so numb and so profoundly impacted by that. And I think that speaks to like the level of connection you have with these characters. If one of their deaths really like impacts you on the gut level. And I guess it's the mysteriousness of it all. It's such a blend of different influences, and I think it's kind of hard to. There's always some mystery tied to it, and I think that really engaged me as well because, yeah, there's always something to discover, something to interpret, and yeah, I just love that.
I got you. Robin?
I mean, one of the, and you mentioned it with Eddie's death, which, good Lord, I don't think I even knew that I was capable of emotions that hard at such a young age. It hit me harder than Harry Potter, to even though I loved those books back then. I think it's something about following that quest for so long and the characters developing so much. I mean, Eddie going from this crack addict just smuggling heroin to this great character. But I think to me it was, especially early on, it was Roland himself. I mean, just straight off, gunslinger is simply cool. Like, dudes in a long flowing coat with a cowboy hat and revolvers. It's just a cool aesthetic, especially as a young teen. But just the character as a whole kind of spoke to me and what I thought like proper masculinity should be. Like a man that stands up to his ideals, and I'd often like in my teenage years sort of think to myself, okay, what would Roland do? Which I think really speaks to how well those characters are developed, that I could orient my own decisions by a fictional character's morals. So yeah, I think that character really kind of had an impact on me.
Yeah, and nobody's looking for you, right, Robin? No cops or anything like that. You didn't take out a city of
Not
zombies
in
coming
this
after
universe, at least.
you. I got you. All right. No, yeah, it's awesome. I I do agree with you guys. Like as far as the themes, um, one of the themes that really stuck out to me when I was reading this is kind of like um, the metaphysical theme of it all, with Stephen King being actually in the book
Yeah.
or in the series, right? And I think it's really interesting that it kind of plays into. So there's a Bible verse that says, or like in the very beginning, let's God made man in His own image, right? So the fact that we're made in God's image, right? If you believe that school of thought, then we are ourselves creators, right? And we want to create worlds ourselves. Like that's part of our nature because it's built into us. And then Stephen King kind of plays with this concept because eventually Eddie and Jake, right, go and visit him and see him in
Yep.
person, and then encourage him to write the Dark Tower. And it's kind of like a cycle thing. Like he is creating this universe, and in this universe, these people depend on him as the creator, right? Now, he also talks about maybe being influenced by Ka to do all this stuff, but like I think it's a really like interesting way of looking at it, right? Like any universe that we write or draw, whatever, is another creation and another reality in itself, right? Are there any themes that kind of stuck out to you guys, like how that sticks out to me, or You know, anything in particular about the books that kind of makes you wonder about, like, you know, why Stephen King decided to do what he did?
There you go. To me, I think the whole technology, like technology, is a huge topic. Is I think it's special was the Wasteland. I think it's the Wasteland, yeah, where they get to the city that is basically still dominated by technology. They fight to the beat of a ZZ song, and basically the machines basically control them. And we see that everywhere. With Shardik, the bear. There's very like futuristic technology in this very well, yeah, very Fallout-ish world. And I think even Blaine, the train being your little nightmare train, being this force of evil. I think the characters now live a very simple life, but they live alive, and we constantly see glimpses into other universes that collapse because of technology or even with it. So that's a theme that kind of stuck out to me. This kind of this weird setting of old timey versus technology, and how technology might work, but really just kind of led to the downfall of the people.
I think. Sorry, go ahead.
No,
No.
go for it, Julie.
I think redemption as well. Like the gunslinger, he's a pretty doomed character. He's very flawed. He did some terrible things in his past, and his tragic background. And I think he tries to redeem himself through his journey. And we see that he is, yeah, he's not someone who he's not just your typical like just all good hero. He has to almost sacrifice himself to redeem what he did in the past or what he lived through.
Do you think he's trying to redeem himself?
Maybe he's not. That's not his conscious intent, but I think that this theme is played out.
Yeah.
Yeah. And but part of me wonders, just from what I know about the story, do you think he's more focused on getting to the Man in Black and maybe getting some sort of revenge for what happened when he was a kid, like with his mother and father, or do you think it's more about him really protecting reality?
I think the two are really kind of fused for him. That's I mean that's one of the biggest topics. I mean he lets Jake, the boy who he really came to love, die because he goes to the tower, which is another like go then there are other worlds than this. This is a wonderful quote, and then it really breaks him apart in the second book too, because he saves him later on by stopping the guy who originally sent him to Midworld from doing so, and it really breaks him apart that he constantly has to betray, kill, or leave behind people who are very important to him on his ultimate quest to the tower. I mean, Susan Delgado, his first love, he lets her burn because he's busy with his quest, and Eddie at the end, etc. So I feel like that was makes him such an interesting character too. You can tell he cares for these characters, but there's just such a deep rooted, some might say addiction, other might say it's the car leading him, but he has to get to the tower even if it costs him all the people that he so dearly loves.
Yeah, I think that's also what you said also adds to this theme of him being this kind of this redemption theme or the redeemer figure, that he has to go through these sacrifices in order to reach his final goal.
Gotcha. And another question that I have about the book, I the fact that it's a so I think you and I, Julian, talked about it a little bit the first time we met, but it's kind of a Ragnarokian cycle. And just for anybody who doesn't know, if you've ever seen the symbol of like the snake or the dragon that eats its own tail and it's a circle, right? It's just kind of like an endless cycle, right? why do you guys think Stephen King chose to make a book like that, or he calls it his magnum opus? Why do you think he chose that as his theme?
I think he didn't choose it. I think he actually said himself that the books they almost write themselves, or he doesn't know where a story goes when he sets out to write a new story. I think probably this was just the only possible conclusion to the whole thing.
I mean, he before the actual end, there is a chapter where he literally asks you as a reader to "Hey, please stop reading, an end is never good." So he really tells you to put the book down, which I did for about 2 minutes before I picked it back up because I couldn't stop. But I think at the very end of the book, we see him back at the beginning of his journey, but he does have, I think it's the horn, is it? Yeah, the horn that he lost in the past in the previous circle. So while it is a cycle, it's not exactly a closed circle. There are changes. So to me, that sort of leads back to that redemption theme. That potentially, if he repeats it often enough, that he might have the tools to save a character that he couldn't before. I mean,
Yeah.
whether the tools are literally physical and like with the horn, or more metaphorically. But I feel like there might yet be a conclusion to Roland's story. Not that he's actually gonna write it, but that there might be one for us to think of.
Yeah, one thing I thought was interesting when I was researching this the series is that it said that supposedly the movie was supposed to be the next cycle.
Oh,
know,
okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it
I think
wasn't.
that's
That's accurate. Okay, cool. So it's not supposed to be a literal interpretation. It's more like a reimagining because it's the next cycle. And um, one thing that I think is kind of interesting is a parallel, and maybe the only reason I think this is because I myself like to write, and I've thought of stories and kind of how I would handle them, and they don't necessarily end when your idea for the series end, and they don't necessarily begin where your story begins, right? Like I think all good writers have like a history in their mind, and then they also have a future in mind. And I think part of maybe why it's a cycle, and who knows if Stephen King even meant it like this, but maybe it's part of it, is because he's a writer. And if you think of what it takes to write a book, you basically start a process all over again, right? You start out with chasing a story until it's finished, and then once it's finished, you're back where you started, where you're starting to chase a new story till it's finished, and then you start over again. It's like that ever going struggle of trying to master your craft. So I don't know if that
Yeah.
makes sense to you guys or not.
Yeah, I could see that.
interesting.
Wonderful.
I mean,
Oh, go
yeah,
ahead.
the whole circularity theme is ever present in the book, even without the ending. I mean, he goes to New York in many different time periods. He prevents events that have already happened to him or people he's met. And I mean, you called it his magnus opus. It's also like it feels like his central work, because I mean, a lot of people talk about the Stephen King metaverse because a lot of books like Pennywise and Shining are connected, etc. And they always seem to somehow find their way back to the Dark Tower. So I think that might also be sort of a way for him to keep going with the story, even if it's just very tangentially by just mentioning a character or having Randall Flagg show up in some guys. I mean, in a lot of his books.
Yeah, and the whole fourth book is basically just backstory.
Yeah.
So it ends.
I got you. And also the Man in Black. Correct me if I'm wrong. He's also the antagonist in other books. No.
The Stand.
Stand, yeah.
He's even Randall Flagg, like the same name. I think The Eyes of the Dragon, he's also the antagonist, if I recall correctly. And I mean, characters show up everywhere.
And
Yes.
another theme that's really prevalent in the Dark Tower, which is also a theme in a lot of his other books, is the presence of like an evil that's influencing the world. Why do you think he keeps coming back to that theme?
I think it just makes for a great story. I mean, it has almost, I mean, Randall Flagg or the Man in Black, as supernatural as he is, there's something physical about him. He's a man, the man, even if he is in black. But the Crimson King is such a he's almost a force. I mean, story wise, he's half demon, so he's actually he's a very far relative of Roland himself. So he's half the family of Eld, the gunslingers, the basically the force for good, and half demon. So to me, it has almost a Lovecraftian aspect. There's this evil thing that's just beyond our grasp and whose motivations are beyond our grasp. I mean, breaking the tower literally destroys reality, and that's their goal. So I think it makes for a very good antagonist, that like, the combination of having someone you could kill or you can see, and at the same time there's this unknowing, almost primal force of an opponent.
I mean, good versus evil is obviously ancient theme, but I think like there's a parallel between the Crimson King and it, and it is obviously a manifestation of our fears. It's just not just some fixed. Obviously, it's fun to make up all these creatures like zombies and vampires. That's just fun. That's just a fun component of a story. But I think it goes beyond that. There's also like the symbolized aspect of whatever our own fears are. So it shows up as whatever you fear the most.
If I recall correctly, doesn't the Crimson King have a similar ability where he manifests with like your fears power as manifestation? I thought so. In the short story with the little sisters. I don't know if you've read that. There's a short story where Roland appears. I can't recall sister something, little sisters of
Illyria.
Is it? Yeah, it might be.
Yeah.
That's interesting. And there are quite a bit of short stories that are related to, well, and his books in general are kind of related to the Dark Tower, like you said. But there are quite a bit of short stories. Are there any of them or any side books that somebody should read if they want to read both the Dark Tower and one of the side books?
I mean,
think
the
one-
obvious.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
One that I'm just reading right now, catching up on, is Salem's Lot, and there's one character in the fifth book, the Wolves of the Kella, called, I think, Father Callahan, and I think he's a major figure in Salem's Lot, but I haven't finished it, but it's one of his like most well-known books. I think it is probably, although it's a pretty long book, The Stand, yeah, I'd say those are important. And there's obviously the comic books, and there is he did another book after he finished the Dark Tower called Wind Through the Keyhole, which is the Dark Tower 4.5. Correct me if I'm wrong, Robin.
I think so. Yeah, it's after Wizard and Glass when they leave the palace and before they go to the Wolves of Kala. Yeah.
That's a pretty cool edition as well.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I'd
And
love to see. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go for it.
I would love to see more stuff like The Wind Through the Keel. I wouldn't like to see a continuation of the story. I think it's exceptional as it is. But I mean, The Wind Through the Keel is basically just them weathering out, well, a blizzard-esque storm, and while they do so, they Roland tells a story of his past. And I mean, one of my favorite parts in the books in general was him telling stories of his past, how he got to his guns and all of that. I mean, we talked about before the whole story with his parents and stuff, but I think there's like you mentioned, the character goes much beyond what we can find in the books. So I'd love to see more of what made Roland Roland, of his past, of the adventures he and his friends went through. Some of them are alluded to, some fights or stories, and I'd love to see more on that because it's a fantastic setting and the characters are just great.
Yeah, I was kind of so when the Dark Tower movie was coming out, I was really hoping to see that scene where he got his guns, right, and like the whole story behind it. Because honestly, to me, uh, as a person that's really into character development and the psychology behind stories, right? I am of the opinion that he was really looking for revenge on the Man in Black, right? When you're a child, your father's kind of your hero, whether you like it or not, whether he's a good guy or not. And like when somebody slights your father, right, in the sense that the Man in Black was basically sleeping with his mother and kind of flaunting it in front of everybody, right? That's the main motivation why he wanted to get his guns, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and the way he did it also was so clever. Like I would have never thought to use a hawking hawk, or falconry hawk to, attack. Right? You're basically bringing two people into the fight against one. But pretty genius. I thought it would have been a great scene and a great segue
Yeah.
into the story if it would have been added to the movie, but unfortunately it wasn't.
Yeah, I was kind of freshened up on my Dark Tower before this, just to make sure I still like. And I was looking over a summary of the story, and they didn't mention the name of the hog, and I instantly thought, oh, David. But when they mentioned that, it's just mentioned in a side, like something like, oh, the hawk died, and they just go on. But I had this visceral reaction because I remember it, like I say remember, it's a book, but I remember what it was like when he died. Like I have this perfect image of his crumpled up body there of the hawk. And it's such a like it had even now, like what, 10, 15 years later, I have such a visceral reaction to the death of a bird. It's incredible. It's just such good writing.
And and you know what? Now that I think about it, right now, like that's probably foreshadowing of Jake, right? Because he sacrifices the hawk for his goal, right? And then later on, so this is like like his youth. So it kind of like got him used to like, well, if I have to sacrifice this living being that's close to me, right? I mean, a hawk doesn't really compare to a human, but still, it's kind of like this is going to be a real cynical way of seeing things, but serial killers, they say they start with little animals when they're young and they move on to people when they're older. So maybe it's kind of like a foreshadowing of, hey, he'll sacrifice this animal right now to get his guns, and then later on he'll sacrifice Jake to get to the Man in Black.
Yeah, and Eddie and everyone else, he can, like Cuthberg and Alan, I think his two childhood friends. I mean, pretty much anyone who's part of his quartet, of his group, of his friends, eventually dies. And I mean, the Man in Black often mentions that. That's part of why they go back in time to look at the stories. The Man in Black tells them, if you stay with him, he will get you killed, because that's just his singular purpose, getting to the tower, even if it means sacrificing everyone.
And why do you guys think that they stay with him then?
I think it's different. I think for Eddie really needs to see the tower himself. If I recall correctly, there's even a scene at the end where it kind of goes towards that, where if you stay with me, you will die. I will be the only one who gets to tower, and he could do it alone at this point, Roland. But Eddie has to see it to the end. So I think Eddie. I mean, Eddie, when he finds him, he's a drug addict with no backbone, and he gives him his life back, and I think he saw. I mean, it's the age-old story of one addiction replacing it with another. But I do think that Roland and his absurd quest for this metaphorical concept that turns out to be a real thing might have just replaced Eddie's drug addiction in a way. Might have given him a new purpose, something to strive for.
Yeah, I think it also speaks to the bond that they develop with Roland. Like despite his flaw character, they form a deep bond, all of them.
Yeah, they're such great characters. There's a right when they meet Stephen King, they cross a lake. I don't remember if it's before or after. And there's just a side note where Eddie thinks to mention something to Roland, or like thinks, oh, I'll have to mention this to him. There's just little did he know that there would be no chance.
Yeah.
And I remember that driving me crazy. Thinking like, oh,
Yeah.
does that mean one of them will die? Or maybe like that drove me crazy for a good week. I couldn't stop thinking about just this little side note. Oh, that was incredible.
Yeah, definitely a good way to build anticipation on that one then. Uh, okay, so you guys say you love the characters, and I'm gonna be a little bit mean right now, and ask you guys which one's your favorite character.
Wow, it's
I know
difficult. It's really difficult.
it's asking you which one's your favorite child. I understand.
Yeah. I think despite saying what I said about Roland before, I think Eddie might just be my favorite. He's just such a human character. And I mean, obviously he's closer in time, closer to our time, but he's just such a fantastic character, from this broken man that he was to the man that he eventually becomes. It's just a wonderful transformation, and he's just awesome. I absolutely, and it's my favorite part of the series too. The second book, the beginning, where he goes and where Roland goes to Eddie, and I mean it's somewhat of a comedy too, because I mean this man living in a Wild West world sees a plane and the food and all of that stuff. But it's such a good character, Eddie. Probably my favorite.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to go with Eddie as well.
Gotcha. And it kind of sounds like to me that he's the true redemption character in the story then. Like just kind of turning his life around and becoming this person that's fighting evil, right? It's kind a lot of times people maybe misunderstand why people are drug addicts or why people have chosen a path in life, and maybe looked down on by society. But instead of choosing this character and leaving him in a tragic state, Stephen King turned his life around and kind of made him into, a quester or a hero of sorts. So that sounds pretty interesting. Okay, and following up on that question, I'm gonna throw another one at you guys. Out of the 8 books, which one's the favorite?
For me, it would have to be the second one, Drawing of the Three, which also is an incredible book title, by the way. Just because you get introduced to all these characters, and I mean, the first book is more vanilla than the rest. The first book is still mostly a Wild West story. There's some fantasy in there, but it's mostly enormous. And then it just goes off the rail, and just the way him waking up with the crab things coming at him, the crab, like the lobstrosities as he calls them, going didachuk didachong as they eat his fingers, that's just such an incredible way for a second book to start.
Yeah. Yeah, for me it's the Wastelands, third book. It's actually my all-time favorite book. And I actually remember, like, I got it out of the library, and I walked home with the book in my hands, and I read it as I walked along the street.
Giving
on the sidewalk.
Giving little children nightmares as he passed by.
Yeah.
Like,
Exactly.
here's the train cover.
Yeah, and yeah, I just consumed that book absolutely, and like due to the different settings that it has, and Blaine and Riddle in the end, and
Incredible. That was a huge part of our sort of Dark Tower ritual. The library was what, like 2 kilometers, 2.5 kilometers from where we lived, and we would just walk there and just talk about Dark Tower nonstop. And he was always a little bit ahead of me in terms of what he'd read. So it was always great because could see how much it meant to him that he can finally talk about this part that I
Yeah,
said.
that's true. Yeah.
That was just for a good probably 3 4 years. That was just all we did. Just walk to the library, just talk about Dark Tower nonstop. Incredible.
Yeah, I think to add to another thing, the question you asked about like why it left such an impact, that's something we also like recognize, that how incredible it is that something that someone made up, something that someone just Stephen King just made up out of his imagination, that something like that can have such a profound impact on our lives. It's really incredible.
Yeah, it is. And it's kind of like I said, like it's almost like we're born to create, and then when somebody creates something wonderful, you get so excited about it, and it's even more exciting when you have somebody, like you and Robin, both of you had each other to kind of feed off of one another. Like
Yeah.
I think in high school and in middle school, the biggest reason you make friends is because, hey, I like this, you like this, all right.
Yeah.
I understand you to some degree. Let's be friends,
Yes,
right?
totally. Yeah.
Like for me and my friends, it was Dragon Ball Z when I was like in middle
Yeah.
school. And it was like anybody who watched anime in middle school and high school were like, okay, you're my friend. We're
Yeah.
we're gonna get along just fine.
Yeah, it's
Oh, what were you gonna say, Robin?
no, it's just saying you're right, it's a huge part of growing up. And I mean in the very beginning he's walking through the like he's chasing the man in black and he's out in the desert. And I recall rereading it a few years ago, and it's not actually described like very in detail, the time of day and the looks. And I remember me and Julian had that conversation a few times how we imagined it. And I have this, I mean, I know how it has to look. It's just how it is. And it's very different from what he imagines that very same scene. And yet we can, which I think is part of the magic of a book as opposed to, say, a movie, because we can love the same scene. We can spend hours every day talking about it, and yet we still imagine them very differently. If I were to somehow project my image of Eddie, it would probably be very different from what you or
Yeah.
Julian imagine.
Yeah.
And yet we have this common bond, which I think is why books have a special place in my heart as opposed to other more visual media. There's this level of personalization to the world that no one can really take from you.
Totally.
And that I really like how you put that, because I haven't really thought of that, but I think you put that wonderfully. That really, with a book, you personalize it to what you feel like it should be, and that's pretty spot on. So thank you for that note. That's really good.
You're welcome.
Yeah. So, other than the Dark Tower and the books, Stephen King is really well known for his, the movies or the scripts that he helps write or, inspires. Are there any movies that you guys like from Stephen King? Because honestly, most of the people that I know that know about Stephen King is through the movies. So are there any of the movies that kind of stick out to you guys?
I mean, there are obviously like the most common ones like Shining, It, Sean Sharks, The Green Mile. I wonder if that's more of an America thing, because I don't think a lot of people know who wrote like Shawshank Redemption. I don't think a lot of people know that that's a Stephen King work.
Actually, there's a really funny story. I I love reading facts like on Instagram. They have like a bunch, like there's a bunch of accounts that do like random facts, right? And one of my favorite random facts is that some lady went up to Stephen King, and she's like, "I don't like the movies that you write. They're so horrible. They're so visceral." She's like, "You know which movie's really good? Shawshank Redemption. You should write stories like that." And he was like, "I did." And I think it's interesting too. If I'm not mistaken, on the movie ratings, I think Shawshank Redemption has the highest rating of any
On
movie on
IMDb,
IMDb.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah, and for a good reason too. That movie is incredible. I think it speaks to his absolute genius that he can have. Like it is at the forefront of horror in general. Everyone knows where
Yeah.
is Johnny, like all these, and yet he
Right.
just cranks out a quick Green Mile or a Shawshank Redemption just on the side. I mean, I think there's I mean, I know a lot of people don't really like him as an author because they don't think he's as accomplished or as good a writer as some people, but I think there's something to be said for the pure amount of stories he can put out in so many different genres. They're just incredible.
I think it's funny. There's an interview between him and G- George R. Martin. Is that right? I think I'm saying
Yeah.
his name right. I'm not as big of a fan of the Song of Ice and Fire, as other people are. But there's an interview between the two, and it's pretty funny. Stephen King tells George, he's like, or Martin, he's like, "Is there anything that you want to ask me? Anything at all?" And Martin's like, "How the fuck do you write so many books so fast?" And dude is a machine, man. Just and as far as accomplishments, I mean, I am hard pressed to think of any writer that's as accomplished as Stephen King. Like, I'm almost more of a fan of the man himself than of the books because I mean he's just so impressive. Like, just the amount of movies and books that he wrote and how touching they are. Um, like when I was a kid, and I didn't even know this was a Stephen King book. But Hearts of Atlantis was like a movie that had just such a strange impact on me, and I didn't really understand why as a kid. Um, as an adult, you understand it's a coming of age story, and kind of went through some similar things with some similar themes with my family that, and I forget what the main character is called, but I know it was played by Anton Yelchin, right? And Anton Yelchin and I were the same age, right? So like it's kind of like, oh, I see this kid in this movie, and we're going through similar circumstances. That's probably why it kind of impacted me so much. And then that's a whole other story with Anton Yelchin because we're the same age, and I guess you guys are around the same age too, if I'm doing the math correctly. But when he passed away, that was like such a huge blow. Somebody that you've never met, right? Like he passes
Yeah.
away, and it's like so tragically sad. But yeah, like, and then the Green Mile, right? How I think putting such a gentle person in such a terrible situation, just his ability to come up with those scenarios and that character development. It's kind of hard to compare Stephen King to anybody else.
I think that, like, I think you bring a good point there, because I mean, there are plenty of authors that put out a lot of books with maybe even in different genres, but there's very few authors that put out books that mean so much to so many people. I mean, there are people who would hate The Dark Tower and find it just boring fantasy dribble, but absolutely love Shawshank, like the story of the lady you mentioned before. And that I think it's incredible that he can create such enticing stories and characters in so many different. I mean, the book on Kennedy's assassination is one of my favorites by him, and it's incredible. It's just such a. I don't know if you've read it or heard of it, but
No, I actually haven't heard of it, but oh wait, no. I know what you're talking about. 19
yeah, I couldn't
74,
recall the something.
right?
I could recall the title 11/26/63. It's
Oh,
called.
right.
Because that's the date when Kennedy got shot.
Right.
And I mean,
And
yeah.
James
Sorry, go
Franco, James Franco was the star of the show on Hulu. I don't know if you guys have seen the show on Hulu yet.
No,
No? Okay, so
I
that's
think
funny.
so.
I'm like, I've never heard of this book, and then as soon as you say the day, I'm like, oh, okay, now I remember. But yes, they actually made that into a series. on Hulu. And I thought
Oh,
it,
okay.
yeah, I thought it was a great series. And James Franco is the main character. And again, I think it's one of those cycle, those stories that play into the cycle nature, right?
Please
First,
don't spoil anything. I haven't read it.
huh?
Please don't spoil it. I haven't
Oh,
read it.
Oh,
you haven't read
okay.
it. Oh no. I want to talk about it so bad now because I'm like, yes, I know the whole story. It's really good though. It's
Yeah.
okay. I'm just gonna recommend it.
Yeah, sorry for interrupting.
No, no.
No, I don't want to spoil it for you. I don't want to spoil it for you. But definitely, for anybody listening or watching, if you want an idea on whether you like Stephen King movies or books, that's a good one. That's a good one to watch. And I think it stands on its own. I don't think it's related to anything.
No, it's honest. I didn't know they made the series. I find that most Stephen King cinematic renditions, I'd say, either are incredible or they're very like meh. I mean, some of them are really good. I mean, Shining and Shawshank Redemption stand out as movies, even just within the movie scene, they're incredible. And there are some books that are just like, yeah, okay. I mean, the Dome series, I don't know if you've seen that, Under the Dome.
No, I haven't seen Under the Dome. I do want to read the book though. I'm not. I'm
Yeah,
not. I'm not as interested in the series as I am the
yeah,
book.
it's very meh. Same with the Dark Tower film for me, actually.
Yeah.
It was very meh.
Isn't The Mist also a
Yeah.
Stephen King
Yes.
adaptation? And I want to tell you, there is no movie that freaked me out as much as The Mist. And I haven't read the book, and I don't think I want to read the book, to be honest with you. Julian, have you both watched The Mist?
No, that's
I've
one
seen it,
I've
yeah.
also missed.
Oh,
But you've
okay.
read it, Julian?
No.
Oh, you haven't read it either? Okay.
Okay, so I'm not gonna spoil it for you, and I'm just gonna say this: I kind of have a bug phobia, and that movie freaked me out. So I'm gonna leave it there. Um, but definitely also worth a watch. But they also have Castle Rock, I think is what it's
Yeah.
called, on
Yeah.
Hulu, and that's also pretty interesting because it ties a lot of his stories in there as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think Under the Dome, The Mist, a lot of his books kind of play on this theme of take normal people, and I mean basically the whole zombie genre as a whole does that too. Just take normal people, put them in a extreme situation, and you basically have a story on your own. And I think that's what makes a lot of these books kind of scary too, because not this evil man in black. It's just your neighbor pushed to the limits and how horrible we really can be if pushed. And that's what I find the scarier part about movies like them is just the how horrible people can be if pushed to the extreme. Actually, speaking of just like little facts that you mentioned before, he actually can like The Mist was supposed to be a black and white movie. Just read that recently that it was filmed to be a black and white movie and they retroactively decided not to do it. So I really want to rewatch it in black and white now just to see how different it is.
That would be so creepy.
Yeah.
Ugh. That's like I said. That's one of the movies. It just freaks me out, man. I don't know why. Well, I know exactly why. One scene specifically, I was just like, "This is a lot." But kind of talking about like people being in extreme situations, I kind of feel like we're in a Stephen King novel right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
We were talking very briefly about like situation in the world right now and being quarantined and locked up, and then I think that's probably what has made, like you said, it pushes your neighbors to the brink, right? Like some people can't handle being locked up, they call it cabin fever for a reason. But yeah, The Stand, right? If there was any story that kind of compares to what we're going through right now, it would be The Stand, right?
Yeah.
Except much higher mortality rate than what we're going through now. All right.
Stan is supposed to get a second movie too, I think, or like a new reimagining.
Series. It's already
Oh, is
started.
it the series? Oh, it has? Oh. Because remember, we watched the original, me,
Yeah,
Julian, and a couple of mates. I think it's what, like 8 hours, the entire series? It's like 4
Yeah.
movies or something.
It's like of the 70s or something.
Yeah,
or
yeah.
80s, 80s more likely.
Yeah,
Quite
you can really tell
insane.
with the effect.
Is that worth a watch? You guys recommend it?
It's kind of a guilty pleasure almost because it's the acting. I think the acting wasn't production and acting probably wasn't that great, but it's still a fun watch.
Yeah, I think the movie as a whole is very much a guilty pleasure, but there were the scene with, I forgot what she's called, the Mama something, the old black
Abigail.
lady,
Other
Mama
Abigail.
Abigail. There are some really nice shots there, mostly because it's less acting and no visual effects. But it's worth watching. It's definitely entertaining. We were bored for however many hours.
Yeah, and it's just the experience itself, like with friends and popcorn and yeah.
Yeah.
I got you. As far as yourselves, have you guys been inspired by the Dark Tower to jump into your own creative outlets? Like, do you guys write, make music, anything like that?
Yeah, I do those things, but not in a very still in a very not in a very structured way, in a very amateurish way. I can't say that I've been directly influenced by any of his works, but there's probably you're always influenced by everything, and there must be some influence of him and other great works.
Gotcha.
Not me, not really. No, I'm not a very creative person in that way, or at least I don't express myself creatively by writing or making music. I mean, I'm very much into gaming and like coaching and that kind of stuff, so that's sort of my way to pass that on. But yeah, I think as I mentioned before, it's more so the characters that I hold very dear and that I not so much now that I've sort of became my own person, but very much as a teenager, it helped me with this ideal of who I thought, yeah, this is a person I could aspire to be, even if it is a fictional character murdering children in a Wild West town, but at least some parts of the character.
No, I completely understand. I kind of feel the same way about Naruto. I'm not sure if you guys are fans of the comic at all, but
Yeah, I've seen it all.
oh
I've
yeah,
read it all.
that's in my opinion, that's like my magnus opus that kind of changed my life and the way I saw things. Um, but yeah, that's awesome. I appreciate you guys definitely jumping on here, and I got a couple questions left for you guys.
Sure.
And one question that I love to ask all of my guests, and in this case, we're talking about fantasy books, right? So let's stick with fantasy books. But do you think fantasy or high fiction can change the world?
I think it can change individuals' lives, and through that, it has the potential to change the world because those individuals will inspire other individuals, and I definitely think it can have a very, very positive impact. So maybe not directly, but like through the people who enjoy it and however they choose to act on that.
Yeah, I'd second that. I haven't really read much fantasy after I'd say like my 18th, 20th birthday. I kind of went away from the whole young adult novels because, at some point you realize you're not a young adult anymore. But I've recently, especially now with the quarantines, rediscovered it for myself with stuff like the first Law trilogy. I don't know if you've read that, which is a very dark fantasy. Like, war isn't this great, awesome thing. It's very brutal, and people die of in a miserable deaths. And to me, yeah, I've really just rediscovered it. So I'm reading a lot of like Brandon Sanderson, Stormlight Archives and stuff. It's amazing. So it's definitely changing my life now. I mean, it's definitely saving, at least keeping me somewhat sane in these times. So yeah, I agree with Julian there. Then again, there are books like 1984 and similar books that have a very direct influence. Or like Fahrenheit 51, was it? Fahrenheit
451.
451, yeah.
Incredible book. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. Which has an HBO adaptation. Don't know if you guys seen that. Pretty good.
No?
Yeah, it's with Michael B. Jordan. You know, the star of basically the 2020 or 2010s decade. I don't even know how to say that correctly. The tens decade.
Tens, yeah.
Yeah, the tens.
The Roaring Tens. But yeah, it's pretty good. Definitely worth checking out. And so thank you both. Before I kind of jump into the next thing that I wanted to say, but thank you both for sharing that. But also, I'm really glad you mentioned Brandon Sanderson, because like I probably have mentioned him like every other podcast that I made, and I'm just trying to tell people like, hey, I don't think you guys understand. Brandon Sanderson is gonna be the next Stephen King /
Oh yes.
George R.R. Martin. He's gonna. I have a feeling that as soon as his first movie, or the first show or movie adaptation of one of his books comes out, he's gonna be one of the biggest stars in the writing world.
Yeah.
Like I just think it's a matter of time. Oh,
it's
go ahead.
incredible. He to me is what I thought George R. R. Martin would be for me when I started reading his books. I really enjoyed like his books, like The Song of Ice and Fire, but kind of trailed off at some point. And then I started with the Mistborn saga, and I mean, his magic system is absurdly good. But the way he does foreshadowing, I've never seen anything like it. I mean, in a lot of foreshadowing, it's either very blatant or it feels very shoehorned in. But I've never really had so many, of course, that all makes sense now moments as when I read the Mistborn. As incredible.
Yeah. I kind of ruined it for myself. I kind of know how it ends, but I'm in the middle of reading it right now. So
Nice.
Yeah, I feel you on that one. All right, but definitely, again, thank you guys for joining. So the last thing I'm going to ask you guys for, and I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, put a little pressure on you, but nothing too crazy. Any last parting words, whether it be funny or a quote or words of wisdom or anything that you want to say to the audience to close out this episode?
I was gonna add a Blaine the Mono joke, but I don't know if there's like Blaine the Mono, actually they feed him by asking him riddles. So I was gonna tell the joke or the riddle that defeated him, but I actually forgot the details, so I suck.
I think the riddle was, why did the dead baby cross the road?
Yeah.
I think that was it.
Because it was tied to a chicken.
Yeah.
That's Oh, that's so morbid, but that's so funny.
I'd have something else. Like,
Okay.
Is profanity allowed?
Yeah, not a problem.
Just one sec.
Oh, you came prepared.
Okay.
What's your road on?
That's actually a quote from the Gunslinger. So
Okay, so for anybody who's listening and not watching, he has a shirt that says "Fuck you" and the horse you rode on. I did not know that that's a Gunslinger quote. That's pretty funny because I've heard it so many places.
Yeah.
it's not from there originally, but it pops up there.
Oh, okay, I got you.
I always enjoyed long days and pleasant nights. That's like one of the greetings they use a lot in the Gunslinger. I always quite enjoyed that. Like as a thing you can totally say in like every day, to seem a bit pretentious. No one has any idea where you're coming from.
All right. Well, just like Robin said, long days and pleasant nights, everybody. Thank you so much
Thanks for having
this
us.
episode, and it's a wrap.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Okay.
Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah.